Pense à l'avenir, comme si on pouvait penser à l'avenir. On n'est que le présent.
All right, so the game plan for today is Caesar's Palace, 2-5, no limit hold'em. Alright guys, welcome back to the vlog. This is day 2 of my little Vegas trip, and we're gonna jump straight into the action here today at Caesar's Palace. A quick note before we get started, keep in mind that this is 5-handed poker with no plexiglass, just the face masks, so that's gonna drastically change the way we play hands since there's only 5 instead of 9 players. Anyway, in the first hand here, we're 4-handed, and I look down at 5-4 of diamonds from the button. So I open it up to $25 over a limper and get called by the small blind, and then the limper folds. So heads up in position to a flop of king 6-7 with 2 clubs and a spade. So we flop an open-ended straight draw and nothing much aside from that. So when he checks it to me with some equity, a bit of a range advantage with the king out there, and no showdown value, that is all going to equate to a bet from myself. So that's what I do. I make it $15. No need to go too big just yet. And my opponent makes the call. So we're off to a turn card, which is the 10 of diamonds. He checks it, and similar to the flop, we have a draw and can't really take this one a showdown. So I put in another bet, a little bit bigger this time, $75 to go. And my opponent thinks for a little while before continuing once again. Obviously looking for some help here on the river, which does not come. It's a deuce of diamonds, and we're stuck here with 5 high. So when he checks it to me, I think it's fine to give up, but the fact that there are so many draws on the board makes me want to bet, because even though sometimes he will have a king or some other sort of hand that he's not going to fold, plenty of other times he'll have hands like a better straight draw, or maybe just some queen high or jack high flush draws, maybe even the nut flush draw. And all these hands are just going to fold to a bet and obviously beat us if we check back, since, you know, we have 5 high. So I think I want to put in a bet here, but no need to go too big, since I'm not trying to fold out that already made part of his range, but like I said, instead trying to fold out those draws that missed. So I just make it $75 again. And we get called, so that's not good news. But the surprising part is that we got called by pocket 8s. So kind of got owned here a little bit, I guess. My opponent in this hand is a Brazilian pro who was actually a pretty cool guy after we started talking, but more of him to come later on. Let's just say that. In the second hand here, we're still 4-handed, and a somewhat frustrated older player opens the button to $15 with a $200 stack. The reason I say he's frustrated is because the second he came to our table, he started complaining about how bad he'd been running at the 1-2 tables. So I bear this in mind as I look down at Queen Jack offsuit from the small blind and decide to do something that I typically wouldn't advocate, and that is just call here. I feel like that's not the best play because we give the big blind a good price to continue or squeeze us out of the pot. And also, we can just 3-bet this hand pretty often and get folds since he's opening on the button. Anyway, I decide to proceed with the unorthodox call, mainly because I just felt discouraged to raise a guy with a short stack who seemed kind of ready to start punting it off. Anyway, the big blind does make the call, so we go 3 ways to a flop, which all things considered, I guess, is best case scenario. It's Jack 6-5 rainbow, so we flop a decent top pair here. I check it, the big blind checks it, and the button puts in a c-bet. He makes it $40. It's a pretty big bet relative to the size of the pot. Nothing to do here but just call, I think, so that's what I do, and the big blind gets out of the way. Turn card isn't great. It's a king, and it brings a backdoor heart draw. I check it, and this time my opponent checks it back, so feeling a lot better about my hand now. And then the river peels off the ace of spades. So that kind of sucks because obviously a lot of bluffs on the flop now make top pair. So I check it to him, and he really quickly and forcibly puts out a bet of $100. Something about the way he did this, I know it's kind of funny because, I mean, live reads are unreliable and often just your brain trying to convince you of something that's not actually happening, I think. But in this case, I felt pretty certain that my opponent was trying to look strong. And also his line doesn't make like a ton of sense. He could have ace queen, although I have a queen, so that's a little less likely. If he had ace jack, I suspect him to maybe think about it for a little bit, but like I said, he just really quickly put out a bet. So, as I often do when I'm not really sure what's going on, I put more chips in the pot since, as you guys know by now, that's the way I like to roll. So, after making this $100 call, we actually hear some good news. He says, "You got it." So I flip over queen jack, and unfortunately for my opponent in this case, his day just got a little bit worse because he ran into some idiot who doesn't like to fold. A couple of shuffles later, this same opponent opens the small blind after it folds to him, and I'm in the big blind looking down at jack 3 of diamonds. I'm definitely going to give this player action since it's someone I want to play post flop against, and also he's a pretty cool guy who I just made a somewhat questionable call against. So, happy to put in some money here with the jack 3 of diamonds. And of course, my terrible decisions are rewarded when the flop comes down jack, jack, jack. Obviously not going to be a lot of analysis on this hand. I just thought it was kind of funny and vlog worthy at the very least. He puts in a bet of $15 on this flop. I decide to make the call. Turn card is an 8. I'm hoping this pairs him and gives him a full house, but when he bets another $15, it seems like that's not really the case. Once again, I just make the call since it doesn't seem like he has much. River, unfortunately, is a deuce, completing the flush draw, although that doesn't really matter since there's 3 of the same card on the table. A bit surprisingly, my opponent puts in a third bet, but the bad news is it's $15 once again, so betting 15 every single street doesn't seem like a great hand. So I'm not expecting to get called once I put in the raise, but gotta go for it anyway, obviously with 4 of a kind. So I raise it to $75, and he folds fairly quickly, saying, "Ace high no good, huh?" No, sir. No, not this time. This next hand here is probably the most interesting from the session, in my opinion, and it starts out with me opening Jack 10 suited from the cutoff. That Brazilian player that I mentioned earlier had been re-raising quite a bit, which makes a lot of sense four-handed, and in this hand, there was no exception to that. He makes it $45 on my left, and I just make the call. We're pretty deep here. I think we each started the hand with a little over 1,000 at this point. So keeping that in mind, as we go to a flop of Jack 4-3 with 2 clubs. So we flop top pair, and that's about it. I check it to him, and he down bets to $25. I think a lot of times people will tend to just call in this scenario, but I've been getting into the lab a little bit and looking into some post-flop play against down bets. And it turns out that you should be check raising top pair against small sizing, at least sometimes, just because it just makes the hand so much easier to play for your opponent if he can bet really, really small and get away with realizing equity after you just call. Also, it keeps our range a little bit disguised since we would be check raising draws like 6-5 of diamonds, 6-5 of clubs, maybe ace-5 of clubs, hands of that nature. Because of that, we should also be raising strong hands like sets and top pair. So that's a long-winded way to say that I decided to raise here. I made it $75, no need to go too large since he's going to have so many airballs, but it seems to not be the case this time because my opponent proceeds with a call. We're off to a turn card here, which is the 9 of spades. This card is somewhat neutral, but it's going to improve more of my hands than his hands. I'll be turning a lot more equity on this card with hands like 10-9 of clubs or even Jack 9. But on the other hand, he shouldn't really improve on this card almost ever. So I decided to make another bet here to the tune of $90. And once again, my opponent makes the call. River card's fairly interesting. It's the deuce of clubs. It completes some straight draws as well as the most obvious flush draw. I decided to check it this time. It feels like we're out of value and our hand is kind of smack dab in the middle of our range. It's not strong enough to put in another value bet, and it's not weak enough that we should feel the need to bluff with it. So that leaves me with a very simple check and evaluate what my opponent does. And what he decides to do is all in for almost $800, so a massive overbet. And against that sizing, even though sometimes we'll be getting bluffed, I think we're gonna have to let this one go here. It feels like Jack 10 is just too weak of a holding to call off here, so after thinking for like 30 seconds or a minute, I decide to just muck it. And my opponent later told me that he had King 6 of clubs. Whether or not that's true, we'll obviously never know, but it was a very specific hand to claim to have, so I definitely give him credit, and like I said, he was a pretty cool guy, so I doubt he was being dishonest. Anyway, if you are watching this video, my friend, very nice to meet you, and I hope to never run into you again, because pretty tough opponent. Alright, so the game just broke out of nowhere, leaving me with not a whole lot of vlogging to do, obviously. I guess I'll just head back across the street to the Bellagio or somewhere else, because this vlog definitely doesn't feel complete just yet after like 3 or 4 hands. So, let's go across the street back to the Bellagio. Also, can someone please explain to me why everyone goes to the Bellagio? It seems to me like all the other poker rooms are fine. I don't really get it. You guys aren't gonna believe this. I just sat in a 5-10, play one hand, and the game breaks. Probably just gonna jump into another game now. Alright, so finally, after hunting for a game that doesn't fall apart the second I set foot in it, we land in another 2-5 here at the Bellagio and quickly get involved in a hand where there's 2 limpers and I raise ace-jack from the small blind to $30 and only the button makes the call. So we go heads up to a really sexy looking flop of ace-ace-10 rainbow. I put in a small bet and here's some good news when my opponent announces a raise. Alright, so he makes it $65 and I proceed with a call. Turn card is a jack of diamonds, bringing in a backdoor flush draw and giving me top full house. I'd say that's a pretty good card overall, especially when my opponent decides to continue mashing chips into the middle after I check it. This time it's a $125 bet. Again, just going to proceed with a call here. It seems like he's bluffing since we block so much of the strong hands on this board, so don't want to shut down any of those bluffs. And so we're off to a river card, which is the King of Hearts. A pretty interesting card, I think, because any queen now makes a straight. And it seems like the button, unless he's just got like a random airball, will often have a queen in a lot of his bluffs, such as Queen 10 or Queen Jack, maybe even King Queen. I decided to do something a little bit weird and put out a blocker bet. This isn't necessarily recommended, but because my opponent in this case was a loose cannon from what I had noticed in the 15 minutes I've been watching, I felt like I was going to get a lot of raises from strong hands. Again, I know this is unorthodox and I would not advise doing this against like a very strong opponent, but in this case it felt like the right thing to do, so I put in a $75 bet, to which my opponent responds all in. So it seems to have done the trick. I quickly make the call and just flip it over right away, but it seemed like he wanted to fold his cards before I even flipped him over. But that's okay, no complaints, no need to see anyone's hand. I'm just happy to have finally found a game that doesn't break right away and scoop a big pot right off the bat. In the next one, we see a $20 open from early-ish position. The cutoff makes the call, I make the call in late position, and both of the blinds make the call, I think. So multi-way to another very nice flop of Jack 8-4 with 2 diamonds on the board. Action checks to the original raiser, and I'm happy to see that he puts in a continuation bet. Typically, this is going to be a pretty strong play if you consider that there's so many people in the hand. Even though he is a pre-flop raiser, I don't expect him to just blindly c-bet into so many people. He's often going to have a very strong hand here, so when the next player makes a call and the action gets to me, I'll definitely be putting in a raise. Another reason that I think a raise is a good play in this occasion is because we don't block any of the strong hands like Ace-Jack or King-Jack, and we could also balance with so many strong draws on this exact board. We'll have straight draws, flush draws, and combinations of all the above, so definitely going to be raising with bottom set as well. I feel like I can go pretty big here and still get action, so I make it $250, but somehow the original raiser folds right away, which I gotta admit seems a little surprising because he came across as a strong player, and I would imagine that he's not really betting into the field with a hand that is just going to snap fold to a raise, but alas, that's what happened. It gets back to the cutoff now, who called the $50 flop bet, but sadly he also makes the fold, so we get no action here with bottom set on such a wet board. I gotta say, that was pretty surprising and a bit disappointing, but I'm okay with it. I definitely think a raise is the play, and it's nice to be flopping sets regardless. In the next hand, there's a limper in early position, and I decide to isolate with pocket threes, so I make it $25. Unfortunately, both of the blinds make the call as well as the limper. So, 4 ways, we're just at the mercy of flopping a very strong hand to win this one, which once again is exactly what happens. It comes down Queen 10-3, but the thing is, it's all spades, so a little bit of a tricky situation. The blinds check it, and as I'm thinking about how much to bet here, it seems like someone makes that decision for me because the original limper leads into me for a pretty small sizing of $30. Contrary to the previous hand, however, this is a board where I'm not going to have hardly any bluffs. Even the ace of spades is not really going to proceed as a raise for me. King Jack as well. I mean, I'm trying to think of hands that I would bluff on this flop with, but there's not many, and on top of that, there's still 2 players left to act behind me who just sort of naturally checked to the pre-flop raiser, so they could be lying in the weeds with pretty much anything. Due to all those things, I decide to just proceed with a call and see what develops. Both of the blinds make the fold, however, so we go heads up to a turn card, which is the 8 of diamonds. We should still have the best hand here, and that seems to be the case when he puts in another bet, but only $45, which seems like a blocker bet to me, and I feel like I'm just going to have the best hand really often now, so I decide to raise for value now. I make it $200, and my opponent doesn't think too long before making the call. Hoping for a clean river card here, which somewhat seems to be the case. It's the Jack of diamonds, so unless my opponent improves to a straight on this card, we should still have the best hand. So if he checks it to me, I'm definitely going to go for some more value, especially considering that he only has around $300 left in his stack. And that's exactly what happens. He checks it over to me, and if he's got me beat, God bless his soul, but I'm going to go for as much value as I can at this point. So I just rip it in there, and he doesn't think too long at all before making the call with Queen Jack with the Jack of spades. So a pretty perfect river card, and I couldn't be asking to run any better at the Bellagio here. In the last hand we'll go over tonight, there's 1 limper, and as if I wasn't running good enough already, I look down at pocket aces from the small blind. So I make it $30 to go. The big blind makes the call, and the limper makes the call. So we're going to go 3 ways here out of position to another amazing looking flop. It's getting embarrassing now. It's ace 10-8 with 2 diamonds. So we flop top set in a board that seems like we're going to get some action on it with quite a few draws out there. Typically, I advocate for just betting top set, especially when it's aces, But in this case, I picked up a little bit of a tell from the corner of my eye where the big blind had like a really short stack and he had been shoving pretty frequently. And I saw him sort of grab his entire stack with one hand. So I decided to check it. And indeed, that seems to work out because he rips in his effective stack of $76, I think it was. The player behind him gets out of the way, which is a bit unfortunate since he had around $400. So there would have been plenty of money left to play for. But when the action's back to me, we have a no-brainer here with the nuts. So I make the call and just cross my fingers that we get a decent run out, which is not the case. The turn card is a 6 of diamonds and the river is the king of diamonds. So our top set is looking pretty miserable now. He asked me if I have a diamond. I say no. That sounds like pretty good news to me, right? Because usually people ask that when they don't have a flush. However, he flips over 3 deuce of diamonds. So he just had the worst possible flush. I guess that's understandable why he would ask me that, but not gonna lie, I got my hopes up for like a split second there. Anyway, aces go down in shambles, and that's how the night ended. Not because I was angry or whatever, but simply the fact that at this point it was like 10 or 11 p.m. and it was time to get to bed. So I decided to call it a night after playing at 2 different spots in one day. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the action, and more so the fact that I had to casino hop to get this video ready for you guys. I'm happy I did though, because I ran super good at the Bellagio and managed to book another win in this little Vegas trip. Alright, so finally back in the hotel room. It's been a really long day and a little bit of a mess, but thank you guys for making it this far if you did. Obviously it helps to run good and make some hands for the channel, so that's always an added benefit. But on top of that, I got to meet someone who I'm a big fan of in this poker community, and that is Matt Berkey. There happened to be a 5,100 no limit game running at the Bellagio, and I just happened to walk right past it and noticed him, and couldn't help myself. Had to fanboy a little bit and ask for a picture, and he was kind enough to help me out with that. So there you go, in all its glory. The funniest thing happened actually, where I asked Matt to take a photo with him, and then someone else in his game asked to take a photo with me right afterwards. I don't know, I thought it was crazy that someone who plays like 5,100 would be watching my stuff, but it was really humbling and probably a little bit confusing to Matt Berkey, because I'm sure he has absolutely no idea who I am. But anyway, so that was a pretty cool experience, definitely more memorable than like flopping sets and coolering people. Nothing really special about that, but those nights are gonna happen, and I'll take it every time. Anyway, that's it for this time, you guys. I got one more day in Vegas tomorrow, and I'm thinking it's gonna be the Orleans 2-5 no limit. I heard they have 8-handed with the glass dividers, so I'll probably jump into one of those games for a few hours, and that'll be a wrap for the vlog. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next video. And if you enjoyed this one, please leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And good luck at the tables. I think that's it for this time, guys. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.